So let me just interject and remind people of the definition that Kendi offers. Racist, one who is supporting a racist policy through their actions or inaction or expressing a racist idea. Anti-racist, one who is supporting an anti-racist policy through their actions or expressing an anti-racist idea. Sharon, you were about to say before I interrupted you.
Yeah, I know, and that it's kind of the whole thing. Thank you for reciting that definition again, because it's important that, yes, Black people can be racist and hold racist ideas. Are we racist against white people when we throw a race card, or they, quote, think we throw a race card? No, because that's not a racist action against them. But then I think, but there's moments where I think we, and you guys talked about it, it's about the assimilation. We start to assimilate and act like them and put those racist ideas and actions against our own people. You know, the example of he gave an example of a slave who just loved his master, and then he was, turned in his own people who were trying to escape and run away, and then later he was freed and he had his own 6 slaves, and he assimilated, and he did racist actions, and he was a racist. And then, Dante, I was thinking about the Chris Rock special as well, which I laughed my behind off. And then after I read this chapter, I regret it, laughing my behind off.
Yeah, I felt bad. I
started thinking about the dual consciousness and that assimilation again, and the difference between the N word when it has an A on the end, or the difference between it when it has an ER. And we're doing the same thing, grouping. When we watch the news and you hear about a crime and you're like, oh, please don't let it be that person, because that reflects on our community. But it shouldn't matter whether it's a Black criminal or a white criminal, but we're starting to assimilate and take on those ideas, and we do it to ourselves. And we have to stop and course correct. So that's what we're doing. We're learning about that assimilation and that dual consciousness. I think that's the work that Black people have to do. The work that white people need to do is learn about everything we're talking about today and have that awareness. Because it's not about blame, it's not about a past, it's where we're at right now and what you're going to do going forward to make change.
Let's dig into the dueling consciousness that Kendi talks about. But before we do, just want to clarify this point. I just want to make this point about the thread that we are currently in, which is that often Black people are accused of being racist by white people when Black people are actually being anti-racist. Right? So when there's a push for policy that is anti-racist, Black folks are often accused of being racist. I want to make sure people hear that and grapple with that. So,
or they call it race baiting as well. I've heard that too.
Yes.
Reverse discrimination. That's my favorite one too.
That's your favorite? Do you have popcorn with that?
Well, that's my favorite one to laugh at.
So Kendi references W.E.B. Du Bois's work on double consciousness, and I actually want to read a quote here for those who are not familiar with that that idea. And Du Bois actually died in 1963 on today. Today's the anniversary of his death. Du Bois says, one ever feels his two-ness, an American, a Negro, 2 souls, 2 thoughts, 2 unreconciled strivings, 2 warring ideals in 1 dark body, whose dogged strength alone keeps it from being torn asunder. And Kendi clarifies his thinking about Du Bois's double consciousness by naming it dual consciousness. The dual within Black consciousness seems to usually be between anti-racist and assimilationist ideas. You started going down this road a bit. What are some racist ideas that you have challenged yourselves around that might be important for our audience to hear? As you think about your work and your journey, so I want to really kind of contextualize it there. You think about your journey to where you are in the Hutch in SCCA. What have been some racist ideas that you have had to challenge yourself around in this duel of consciousness?
One that comes to mind, and this occurred probably 20 years ago when I went, and this is a very simple example, but I went from straightening my hair, thinking that was the thing to do because I was going to assimilate. I was going to have the flowing hair, to having braids. And I remember thinking, having folk tell me, are you sure that you can wear braids in the workplace? I mean, that really seems really African. And it was an interesting thing to just come to terms with. I'm going to hope that folk can refer to my work as opposed to my hair, which seems fairly immaterial, to my job. And I had to come to terms with it's okay to not present in a way. And then, I think Bo Derek made it easier, frankly.
Yeah. Stephanie, I was going to say the same thing about my hair and not feeling that it is professional to have braids. And then when I made the switch, I never looked back, and mine was 10 years ago, but I still recently had even my mother ask that question when I was looking for a job a few years ago. Do you think you're not getting the job because of your hair? And I'm like, well, I don't want to work there if it's because of my hair. But it's still something we ask ourselves, are they going to think I'm not professional? Are they going to think, oh, is she I've heard people say stuff, are you a Rastafarian? Because of my hair, and ask me about things like that. And if I'm Rastafarian, maybe I smoke a lot of pot, or if I'm Rastafarian, maybe I have these negative anti-white views. So just a lot of connotations simply because of a hair. And then it made me think about the body chapter, but we might talk about that later. But just having a certain look that presents as professional or unprofessional, and not assimilating and having relaxers anymore and straight hair or weaves is I'm sure it's a challenge to everyone.
For me, it was okay. So, and Stefan actually brought this up in a conversation previously about when we've been told about acting white or talking white. I used to struggle with that. I always wanted to make sure that I was articulate or that I sounded educated. And I wanted to make sure that even with this job in the interview, I wanted to sit up straight. And like, I likened those to majority white traits, like as if, Black folk walk around with their pants sagging in the interview and a gold chain on right before they get the job. And so for me, I would tuck in my shirt, straighten up my tie, and yes, ma'am, yes, sir. And it was just, I've been told that, by other Black people that I talk white or sound white. And so, where I'm from, they call it code switching. And so that's just my personal example. And so I had to kind of think that, after reading this book, like, those are not anti-racist thoughts. Those are just thoughts that they're terrible habits. And so it puts me in that frame of mind to be in an assimilationist type of thinking. Like, I need to sit up straight. I need to talk white. Yes, ma'am. No, ma'am. Yes, sir. No, sir. Type of thing about body language and style. And I want to say real quick that I'm glad that you two brought up the hair example, because my wife had that same problem moving here, working where she was working, and she felt that she had to straighten her. She's natural, but she felt like she needed it straightened for her interviews. And I think one time she was on a call and somebody used the term nappy when she was on a video call, and I was sitting behind her. I was like, "Ooh, I'm going upstairs." So so we see these things, and this is a product of the dual consciousness where we have to reconcile between being assimilationist or whatever, because we want a chance to fit in, and there is a cultural hierarchy or a standard that has been pushed on us. And so we have to fight between, what is quote unquote being African or, being more white or sounding or acting white. And for me, I struggled with it. And then I came to understand, well, I'm just educated. I know how to read. Like, that's just how I talk. I'm grown now. I'm on the other side of 35. Let's not put out numbers, but I'm on that side. And so, so that's how I had to reconcile with it. And I think reading this book really helped me to see things like that, and how we should reject those types of racist ideals. And these same racist ideals give way to racist policies and racist legislations.
Why do Black people and people of color, indigenous people, try to assimilate, you think?
I'm sorry, did you say why do they try to assimilate?
Mm-hmm.
Fit in, to be expected, to be fit in, to be accepted, to get better jobs, to not be treated poorly.
Safety.
Yep.
Safety. And frankly,
safety.
I think that historically, the definition, the bar of what was good and what was acceptable, we didn't set. It was imposed on us. I remember, and this is a funny thing, when we immigrated from the West Indies, and the West Indies was colonized by the British. So my whole family have extraordinary British accents, and I was the last. So I can slip in and out. It depends on who I'm with. But I remember very distinctly when I was a kid, people would think, I was making it up because you sound too white. Or, why don't you sound more? Well, where are you from? From Trinidad and Tobago. Well, and it was just such a ridiculous conversation, and I didn't know how they wanted me to speak. I speak the way I speak. But there seems to be some code that says, well, I think you're getting a little bit above yourself. You ought to have a certain sound to you. And I couldn't mimic it. I couldn't figure it out. So it's an interesting thing. Why do we, aspire to a certain, assimilation? Because it's the path of least resistance. And some days you're just too tired for it all.
Thank you.